Allen Kotlyar here with another interview for Secrets of Digital Marketers. I'm so excited to be able to talk about something that we haven't talked about before, but is so important to being able to run a successful online business, and that's relationships. How do you deal with your family? How do you deal with your significant other? How do you actually balance both working online and also handling your business so that way you don't lose your relationships, but also how to actually support you with what you're currently doing. So welcome to the show so much. How are you guys doing? Thanks for coming on, Brenda.
Doing great. I'm Brenda Dow, and this is my husband, Wesley Dean, as you know, for all those who are listening. We are life coaches specializing in relationships and marriage education, and that includes helping solopreneurs and entrepreneurs with mindset, work-life balance, resilience, and any kind of business or personal dynamics in relationships that affect your work and your spouse and your partner, connections, because those are really important and have a very big effect.
It's so important, especially when you're starting a business, right? You need people that encourage you. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs, who are starting, don't have that encouragement. But the most important person next to you, the person that sleeps next to you, needs to be able to support your vision. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So let's jump right into it and tell us first about your guys' method and your system of how you developed throughout the years, how to develop a successful relationship for people that are entrepreneurs, and how they can work with their spouse or their significant other to develop a harmonious relationship while building a business.
Sure. We did it through trial and error. So we have gone through the challenge ourselves, and we share with others our authentic experiences and teach them the tools that we've applied to make it work for us. Right. We actually met on a job interview. And Wesley was in the group that was interviewing me. And I ended up getting the job, and we were working together. And then I found out he had this side hustle and he wanted to recruit me for the side hustle. Wow. And we became friends, and then we would talk casually about his business, but we were really, primarily focused on the coworker relationship between us. Right. And then a few years went by, and after being friends, we had to handle the dynamic of dating as coworkers, and then taking that leap into our relationship and what that meant, because we left where we were working, and Wes went into the entrepreneur world, and I went on to the traditional career path. And one of the key things that is really important is if there's any tension or stress around this type of thing, it's important to realize what this really means to each of you. What does being an entrepreneur represent for you? What do finances related to income mean to you? Because we have found it's not just about that. It's about everything that it triggers in you in terms of your perceptions and understanding. Right, Wes?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And Wes and I talked about when we ran into our times of trouble when we were trying to juggle the business, we ended up going deep and finding out, what entrepreneurship meant for him and what it meant for me. So why don't you tell him what it meant for you, and I'll tell him what it meant for me.
Sure. Growing up, my father was an entrepreneur. I had always seen entrepreneurial ventures in my life. It was the way one lived their life. They didn't need a boss. They could figure out for themselves. And so I approach, things the same way. Like, I can figure this out. If, they can do it, I can do it. And that was my thinking going into business for myself.
Right. And for me, entrepreneurship was, in my family, what you did when you couldn't do anything else. So my parents had always stressed, get a job, you'll have benefits, you'll have a steady income, all those things. And so when my father lost his job and we were reliant on that, we ended up starting our own business. And it was because he couldn't get another job. So while I was excited at the concept of entrepreneurship, I didn't realize when we hit our times of trouble that it was triggering things in me that were kind of negative associations. Does that make sense, Alan?
It's so true. I mean, what's interesting is when you're in a relationship, you have to think about, is there any person in that family that has been an entrepreneur, right? Oftentimes, you can come from a family that have worked traditional blue collar jobs, right? And then all of a sudden you say, oh, I want to start a business. And now you're like that weird uncle, right? It's completely against the whole concepts of the family. So very, very interesting. I mean, so you guys started out in this relationship, right? You both had different ideas of what it means to be an entrepreneur. How did you find this symmetry so that way you guys actually both were talking the same language?
Sure. Part of it was being very honest with each other and honest with ourselves.
Right.
So many times we would argue about how much money we were putting into the business or how much time, or, were we going to be on call 27 or 24/7, or, how would we balance a regular paycheck with, the entrepreneurial endeavors? And it really wasn't about that. It was getting to the heart of the matter.
Right. And one of the things, I'm personally very conflict averse. So I struggle in our relationship with, I didn't want to get into an argument about finances or about the direction of the business, new clients, who's behind on their bills, stuff like that. So I avoided bringing these topics up to Brenda. And that was a real problem for us. I prioritized my discomfort or perceived discomfort above my responsibility to keep Brenda informed and be an active participant in the way we run our finances and our business.
Mhm.
Mm.
Absolutely.
So, what would you say to people that are just starting in a relationship with an entrepreneur? Let's say they're working a traditional 9 to 5. They've never dated an entrepreneur before. Like, what are some of the things that they need to be ready for? What should they be aware of when starting a relationship so that way it can succeed?
Yes. We've actually experienced this, and we've talked to others who've gone through this before. And part of it is realizing that when you are becoming a partner or dating partner or going into a marriage with someone, that you are combining your life and your lifestyles together.
Right.
And so when you start to go off on different paths, for example, I married Wesley. I was in love with Wesley, not necessarily in love with his dream, right? Per se, even though I told him I'd follow you wherever, because I totally believed in him as a man and his capabilities. It's understanding that in order for you to work together as a team, you're going to have different situations. You might want to be an entrepreneur because now I'm the entrepreneur and Wes is taking a different role. And so what we found out is it's coming back to understanding, like, what is it that we agree on in terms of principles, values, and what kind of rights are we going to give each other? One of the rights that we give each other is the right to be consulted.
Mm.
The right to be consulted. If there's a decision and it's going to impact on the business or the personal finances in any way, we have each claimed the right to be consulted so that we have that input in there. The other thing that we've since evolved is we have prioritized ourselves over other things so that we know, for example, we've agreed that Sundays are going to be time for us. So we've agreed that whatever entrepreneurial activity we do, Sundays, we're not on call. That's going to be for us. So by coming up with those things that are going to be agreeable and negotiable for the two of you helps you pick and run and set up your business model in a way that's not going to jeopardize them. And that's what we had trouble with before, right? We
I
didn't
think
have that clear understanding.
I think that's so important because there's a saying that says whatever gets scheduled gets done. right? But oftentimes in business, we understand that, right? Whatever on our calendar, we're going to get it done. But now, what about our physical, right? Are we scheduling when we're going to work out, right? But also, what about time for dinner, right? What about time for our significant others? Are we letting our lives be dictated by our business, or are we controlling our business and letting it allow us to create a life by design? Right? That's
Exactly.
so huge. I talked to some very successful entrepreneurs, and they said, you know what, Alan, I have in my calendar set aside 30 minutes, an hour for conversation with my wife every night, right? Because if I don't do that, I'm going to get stuck on calls, right? If I don't do that, I'm going to get busy with work. And I think it's so important that you create a life by design rather than by default. And that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. And, Wes will say the reason he wanted to become an entrepreneur is he wanted to work for himself and be beholden to himself. But in essence, if you want to have a quality life, and that for you includes a quality relationship, you really need to make it a partnership to ensure that you have that life. Otherwise, what was the point of becoming an entrepreneur to begin with, right?
Right.
If you're doing it so you can control your life, then control your life.
Right.
Make time.
It's ironic because we'll often spend as entrepreneurs more time on our business working than we would if we're working for someone else. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to work, 24/7 and, give my life to the sky. When you're building yourself, you're investing in your own vision. That's significant. And part of that, I want control is my controlling my schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
And we advise just what you said, Alan, is you need to get time for your family, whoever your family is. If you have children, schedule time for the children. If you have a partner, schedule time for your partner, and make that be a motivation for why you're an entrepreneur. I want to be an entrepreneur so I can control the hours that I have, that I'm not on, a call or call 24/7 for someone else. I'm on call in a certain way for how I want to manage my time. Helps you determine how you're going to shape your business. Like one couple that who we worked with, he ended up choosing a business where he literally was on call 24/7. And at first that worked. And that's what allowed him to be hugely successful in his business. However, they were at a point in their relationship where that wasn't working for them. And so we talked to them about, well, what is it that you get from the business? And what is it that it's taken away by the business?
Yeah.
And how can you separate those out so you can still be successful? However, maybe you can delegate some of these things. Or are you at a level of achievement where you can maybe move into a parallel direction that doesn't demand all this time? Does that make sense, Alan?
Totally. So let's talk about the topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and that is, should all entrepreneurial couples work together?
That's a good question.
It
I don't know. It depends.
It depends.
It depends on your relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your priorities? Because when we found that when when I was working, through my business, I would come into conflict, and that was challenging for me on certain levels. But on other levels, it showed that I cared. Because if I didn't care at all, and I just like, yeah, whatever, then there wouldn't be a conflict. But I cared enough about our relationship to be in conflict with Brenda and to say, I think we should do this, that, or the other, and set, priorities that way. I don't, I imagine that part of your relationship, the way your relationship is, the agreement you have with your partner is really the driver behind it. It's hard to give a single blanket answer to that.
Part of it depends too, is that relationships run differently than businesses do. They're important relationships in businesses.
Right.
And one of the things that we found is that when we're in business mode, what part of our relationship does or does not carry over into the business world, right? So say at home, say you have like what we have the right to consultation, right? We have the right to be consulted. Now, when Wes was the lead in the business, in our business, I would never challenge him in front of people, right? He
Yeah.
was the lead. So if I wanted to say something, we would do it not around the other people in the business, right? And if I wanted to consult on something, we never did it in front of other people. So we always made sure that even though we had this relationship as a husband and wife, we wanted to honor that and not drag it into the business. And when we were able to manage our relationship effectively, then the business went really well. Some people are not going to be able to do that. Or maybe it's a business where you don't have a certain skill set that the business needs. For me, it worked out really well when Wes was the lead because I had an HR background, and we created a internship program that was winning awards on the campus where we were drawing most of our students from. And we worked together on that. And then we each gave ourselves job descriptions. So it was clear to the other people around us, I go to Brenda for this, I go to Wes for that. And so they never saw us in conflict. They saw us supporting each other. Some folks might not be able to manage that, or maybe the jobs available to help the partner or spouse aren't necessarily the ones that the other person really wants to do, right? So
Yeah.
you have to make agreement. For example, one couple that we're friends with, he is the lead in his physician's practice, and she runs the medical check-in area. Now, is that something that she envisioned doing someday? No. Does she do it? Yes, because they've decided that they want a partner in this. And so she's taken it on because she knows she can best manage his personal time. And that's a gift. And it's also, they don't have to pay for someone. And it helps them both have more time together and both be around each other in terms of when important decisions are being made. And that works for them.
Yeah.
It's so important what you said there, because oftentimes, you're not thinking that your spouse, especially if she's staying at home, taking care of the kids, preparing the meals, that is a partner in your business, because that's also allowing you to focus on what you're good at in your business, right? Instead of having to think about all these different things, you have somebody that is supporting you in their own way. Maybe they're not entrepreneurial. Maybe they're not on sales calls. Maybe they're not building out your website, but they're doing what they have agreed upon to help you do what you do at the best possible. So absolutely true. It's very important to know these roles and to figure out how to work with each other so that way you can both get the best possible outcome.
Absolutely. It's keeping in mind the big picture. Why are we doing this? Because as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're doing minutia some days. Sometimes you're doing the thing like, I didn't sign up to be an entrepreneur to do this, but I'm having to do it. Because why? Because I'm either getting started, or this just goes with the territory, or you know what? This is so important that even though I could delegate it to someone, this client or this contact, I really need to handle it myself. And so sometimes it's important to keep apprised of the big picture. We will organize ourselves, especially if we have to travel, so that I will shift to be Wes's assistant. And I will run interference for him. I'll set up the travel. I'll do all those kinds of things, because if we're traveling and he's going to talk to a big client, I need him focused on that big client, okay? Or if he's getting ready to give a big presentation at a conference, I need him focused on that big presentation. And when I am in that mode, he does the same thing for me, right? So it's being flexible. And that is us agreeing that we're a team together. And he would rather work with me, someone who knows him best, and me vice versa, to have that support. And that works for us, but it's not going to work for everyone. And it's being really open-minded and really honest. How is the technique we use, right, Wes?
Right. Honest, open, willing to change.
Honest, open, and willing to change.
I think that's a very important topic you just covered there, because you'd sort of do this naturally, right? He doesn't have to tell you, hey, can you do this for me? You've both figured out each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses. And as a good teammate and as good partnership, you figure out how to be able to support somebody even before they let you know they need it. And that's the goal of an awesome entrepreneurship couple, is that they both know, like, before it comes up, they can sort of preempt what's going to happen and be able to provide that solution with each other. Totally, totally true. So the next question I want to ask you is, so let's talk about it, right? We start a business because we want this financial freedom. We don't want to have to deal with our boss, right? We don't want to have to deal with the coworkers, right? And everything else. And oftentimes it's, such a great story. You read all these books, they talk about the limited amount of time you have to invest, but you have to do it, right? You have to invest time when you start your business. So as you're investing this time in the business, right? And let's say you're not scheduling time for your significant other, you're losing time such as you used to have working 9 to 5. You come home, you have dinner, you hang out, you watch movies, you enjoy each other's time. But now you're spending 12, 14, 16 hours a day working. How do you work with somebody who is in that relationship with you, for them to know that there's going to be this disparity in the beginning of the business till you can build that leverage, till you can have other people work with you, you can have that flexibility? How do you be able to let them know that this is going to happen, and how do you prepare them for the next stages in your business?
Sure. We do it pretty much when we do other things. I mean, I'm going to take a very basic example. Everyone knows when you're going to have a baby coming into your life's going to change. You're not going to get a lot of sleep. Someone's going to have to be up with the new arrival. Things are going to be very different. And though, that it's going to pay off, and that it's only going to be this way for a certain amount of time, 14 months, 2 years, whatever. So by being honest and educating yourself ahead of time and knowing what to expect ahead of time, for us, our businesses are our babies in many ways, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we want to set our partner up for success by including them and educating them, so that it's not this shock or not this surprise, right? I mean, that's what parents do when they get ready. They're reading books, okay? And it's never going to be like you think it's going to be, but you do prepare so that you can, and then you get some help. And one of the things that Wes and I do with couples is, as as an entrepreneur, you're making decisions about priority and time throughout the day. What is going to have my highest return on investment? And when you're booking your time, think about what is going to be the highest return on investment with my partner in terms of our relationship. Because we teach a 20-minute exercise that you can do this in 20 minutes and it'll be such high quality between the two of you. It could be just as good as saying just 2 hours of time together, because we teach techniques about how to make that count and how to really connect for that time that you do have together. You want to add anything to that, Wes? Yeah. So
I think that that's so true. I mean, the important thing to realize is you wanted to start this business not for yourself, right? You wanted to create something for your legacy, something for your family, for the people around you, right? Oftentimes people want to start a business because they're not spending enough time with their family, right? They're required to go to work on a Saturday or Sunday, right? They're chasing after a raise that never happens, and then they give it to somebody else, right? So they want to own this control, right? They want to say, like, if it succeeded, it's up to me. If it didn't succeed, it's up to me, right? So I think it's very important to put this picture together of what it would mean if you did succeed for the people that are part of your life, right? Such as, like, if we hit this goal, we're going to do this together, right? If we hit this amount of income, we're going to Tahiti, and figure out these things that, your significant other has been telling you that they want to do, but you're like, well, I don't got the income. I wish I did. And actually put it together on a board, right? Think about, like, if we had X amount of clients, this is going to be the reward for both of us. And I think that's been a very successful thing for myself in my relationship, because oftentimes, I'm working on things, I'm so focused on building the business, but I forget the human aspect of the other person that I'm so dependent on as well. And it's very important to figure out these little milestones along the way and these different rewards that you can treat yourself and the people in your family, once you reach them, for them supporting you as well. It's so true. So let's talk about the other avenue. Okay, so obviously, it's great when somebody supports you. It's great when you got a spouse that's like, hey, whatever you need, I'm here for you. They bring you smoothies or juices while you're working. You love it. But let's talk about the other scenario, right? You invest a lot of money into a business, you get started, and crickets, right? Nothing happens. And then slowly their amount of faith starts to diminish. And they say, 1 month, okay, well, we have X amount of savings. How long can we last? 2 months. Oh, well, I thought it was going to start quicker than it is. 3 months. Hey, we're getting low, right? Right. And as that money goes down, right, let's all talk serious talk here. It affects the relationship, right? People start to have doubt, right? And then that affects your sex life. Your sex life affects your relationships, right? And then the resentment starts building, anger starts building. Now you start like, somebody leaves a toothpaste cap off, and all of a sudden you're getting in a fight. What can somebody do to prevent this from happening?
Well, what you described is what our life used to be like, Alan. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. And that's why we said we learned the hard way. I think part of it too is, you said, how do we prevent it from happening? Can we in real life ever prevent anything from happening? No, but what we want to do is we want to improve our odds. We want to improve our odds. And we want to focus on what the vision is, not only for our entrepreneurial endeavor, but for our relationship. And if you keep those things in mind, it's what anchors you, so that when things get scary or the trajectory's off or the money's not there, right? You keep hold and fast to what you negotiated, as your couple's bill of rights, what you agreed on was going to be the vision for your business. You can even negotiate in advance. We did too. It's like, how much time, just like you said, are we going to give this? How much money do we have in reserve? But the thing is too, is remember, if you're having people invest in your business, your spouse is your primary investor. Your family is your primary investor. So you want them to be as involved and part of that vision as possible, which is where all those things go off. When you do get in trouble though, and even before, when you go down this path, because you're not going to be able to prevent everything. You want to go in eyes wide open, and it's always a good idea to have like a mentor couple or to be in a program already to make sure that you are communicating, as Wes said, in the how technique, honest, open, and willing to change, especially when life throws curveballs at you, right? So we could set a goal of, this is what we're going to do, but what if it doesn't, what if we don't reach that? Yes, celebrate, but we can celebrate many small successes along the way. So many times we focus on the negative rather than the positive. And Wes and I, we gave ourselves permission when our thing just bombed out the first time, because this isn't our first rodeo. We gave ourselves permission to say, we're going to win and learn. Because as an entrepreneur, failure is a part of life, but you want to fail fast. You want to learn and get up. So if the spouses can articulate that, right, and keep the communication going. For Wes and me, when we shut down or when we felt ashamed or embarrassed, or we didn't, come to the other and say, in advance, I call it PR 101. If you have bad news, make sure you're the one who tells your partner first and be honest about it. Say, hey, look, you are my primary investor. You are the one who I need to be accountable for. This is what we plan. This is where we are. Here's what I'm hoping to do. and I want you to go along with me on this. What do you think? And this is where our right to be consulted comes into play. Because if Wes is coming to me or I'm coming to him, open, honest, and willing to change and willing to consult, then it takes away all the mystery and all the scariness, because you believe by what is being demonstrated by your partner that they see you as their most important investor in this. And I want to do nothing but support Wes when he comes to me that way. Wes?
I think the underlying concept the concept that underlies all of that is communication. It's expectation management. It's, if there's a problem, the other person knows about it. They see it coming. It's trying to minimize surprises. And when there are surprises, minimize the blast radius. How much damage is it going to do? One of the things that I struggle with was finances. So for me, even bringing up a financial question or topic with Brenda was a real challenge on a variety of levels: emotional, just my background, my baggage. So it was a challenge for us to learn how to communicate in a way that I could say things and she could respond. We could be effective in our communication. It wasn't me just blurting out, here's all the stuff, or she said, well, you should do this, that, and the other, and I'm like completely overwhelmed. That was a real struggle for us. It took a lot of investment of time and effort to figure out how to best have those conversations in ways the other person could receive and interact with you in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and to help achieve that, we'll use this as a specific example ourselves. Wes decided to implement a daily business meeting with me to help him be accountable, and I became accountable to him. And it was limited to 5 minutes a day because it was a challenging topic for Wes. So every day I knew at 6 o'clock he was going to report to me, but I also knew that the only time we weren't going to talk was about money for those 5 minutes. I would get 15 or 20 minutes of things that I needed. Why don't you tell them about the 5-minute setup that you did?
Sure. I put on my calendar 6 o'clock work days. Every 6 o'clock work day, we would invoices going out, new clients, money going out, projects, prospects, just anything, a quick bullet list of that go down, and really try to, for me, take that emotional aspect out of it and I'm just doing a report. And if we have to have a more in-depth conversation or a planning or budgeting, something like that, we would schedule in advance so we could both prepare and be ready for it. It wasn't like a surprise, we're doing the budget now, but it was something that was like, we're just going down the list. Like, we spent this, this came and that went out, and pine cone fell off the tree, and here we are. It was just very matter of factual. And that for me made it much easier.
Yeah, because they knew he only had to talk about it for 5 minutes max.
And it's over.
I think another thing too that has been important for me is, I've been building my business, entrepreneurship, and doing a lot of consulting. But my girlfriend, right, she works a traditional like 9 to 5, and it's very interesting because as entrepreneurs, we tend to think that our mission, our vision, the reason we want to build this business is like so grand, right? And it's sometimes I have to catch myself. I don't know if it was for you guys too, and maybe for your clients, to also respect very highly also somebody doing a 9 to 5 in the relationship, because oftentimes you're like, well, what I'm doing is a little bit more important, and that can start making a lot of troubles in the relationship. Have you been seeing sort of that same concept as well with some of your clients?
Yes. And what we do is, first of all, we have a no jackweed policy now. Okay. We don't work with people who aren't going to share our values or are going to threaten what we have. We've agreed on that because when we started out in the early years, we had very demanding clients who didn't respect personal boundaries. So that, when I was the one doing the 9 to 5 and being the anchor while he was following his entrepreneurial dreams, I didn't want him to be on the phone for the limited time that I had, because I had a heavy travel schedule. I had a heavy event schedule. So I worked 9 to 5 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sat down, and when I heard him coming home and talking about like a certain client, we're like, we're going to fire the client.
Yeah.
We're going to fire the client. And do you know how that made me feel? I felt so uplifted, and he was honoring the new agreements that we were coming to, because that was too much of a threat to our relationship. And so we said, we're not going to do that. We're going to decide that these are the kind of clients that we work with. And as we matured and became less desperate, people liked that about us, right? So it's like we started to attract people who understood it was important to have some time off during the week. We attracted people who understood and respected those boundaries as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Wes?
Yeah, I think that the respecting yourself, respecting the other person, honoring the other person, being open to a back and forth exchange is just critical. In the beginning, like you just mentioned about that, the sense of desperation where I just need money in to make the rent or make payroll or whatever, on one hand, and the other hand, I don't like working with this client. I'd rather work for someone else, work for this client. And feeling that, in between, like, how do I manage that? How do I handle that? And growing to the point where you can say, this client, it's just not working out. And my priority to my business, my family, my staff is more important than however much this person's, this client is going to represent in terms of, cash flow.
And to your point, Alan, about, well, I'm more important, or what I'm doing is more important, right? We've had tinges of that. Sure, we're not going to say that. I know Wes has. Part of it is saying that you want to bring to market something that isn't there. So of course you're going to have those kinds of feelings of, I'm doing something really important. However, when you're doing something really important, it's really important to have a team behind you. And it really is important to have someone who's going to lift you up when you're down. And we've learned through lots of ups and downs that we need our cheerleader beside us. And that's each other. And so that's why we try to protect those things. And I'll go back to the example of, like, when you're a new parent but your business is your baby, it's going to be a rough 12, 14, maybe 2 years. and the both of you are going to be aware of that. So part of it is understanding it's going to be a little bit crazy to start with. And we're both willing to, are you both willing to do this for 12 months, 15 months, 2 years? And if you are, great. But understand that on the other side of this, when we get over this initial hump, this is why we're doing it, and we're doing it together. So yeah, for the first 2 years, we were working with people that maybe we didn't want to work with. Okay, we didn't. And it was when we got over on the other side and said, okay, we're getting to a place where we're starting to hit our stride, and we're going to start selectively firing clients who aren't going to be supporting us in our vision. Because if we're not making it work after this amount of time, and we're not making it work with us, we don't want to lose in business and in our relationship, right? We don't want to lose everything. And when we started being kinder and gentler and more cooperative with each other, it made us a stronger united force to be able to stand up and do that in our business too. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I mean, what you guys are talking about is not only the foundation of a business, right? Because a business is relationships, not only relationships with your clients, it's relationship with yourself, but also the relationship to the key investors in the business. And while you're small, right, or even as big as you are, right, you can't do everything yourself, right? It comes down to the people around you. How do you communicate your vision? How do you get them to buy into what you're doing? And it all starts with communication, upfront, realistic expectation, and what each person is required to do, right? So for me, like, if you don't have a clear communication of like, okay, I do the cooking and you do the cleaning, right? So then if you don't do the cooking, right, and you switch it around and she does the cooking today and then you do the cleaning, but then it's like, okay, if I do the cleaning, are you going to wipe the plates? Well, no, I did the cooking, right? So little things like that build resentment, but really they don't have to when you have clear upfront communication. And that's the same with your staff. That's the same with, your team members. And that's what's so important, to be able to learn from people like yourself how to have a successful relationship, right? It's something they don't teach. It's either something you learn by default, like you have an amazing parent or amazing grandparents, and some of us are blessed with that, some aren't, right? Some of us need to meet other successful entrepreneurs, other power couples, and we're like, wow, they're so amazing. And that's really what you offer as a relationship coach, and your guys' whole overall program of how to get into unison together, how to actually be able to have proper synergy. So for the people listening right now, why don't you tell them how they can learn more about this and where to find you online?
Sure. Well, I'm BrendaDow.com. However, as you know, Alan, we're going to give you a free gift for everyone to utilize, and it's going to be called Entrepreneurships and Relationships. And we'll make it available to everyone who's in your membership so that they can go through and see some of the key points. And in there, we will be able to articulate more about some of the things that they can do. And we'll share one of those with you, which is to have a mentor couple. You mentioned about finding a high-powered couple. We have a mentor couple because we practice what we preach, and we meet with them regularly, and they have gone through the highs and lows of business and how they worked with each other and how they didn't work with each other. And you can take that shortcut of hanging out with the right crowd to ask them and to speak with them about, how did you do this? Or what do you advise? Or, you know what? We just need someone we can blow off steam with, or who we can vent to, because you don't want to get your family members involved, right? I don't tell my parents anything about our business or relationship. He doesn't tell anything, right? What we do is we keep it between ourselves and like-minded people who are not going to judge us, but will be there so that we can vent and go, yeah, I know just what you're going through, and listen to us. And then say, hey, would you want some words of wisdom? And then we can say, sure. And then we can listen to their advice, but we're not beholden to it. And they won't ask us about it, right? Afterwards. And so those are some things. So we will share that as a free gift. Entrepreneurship and relationships. We'll have some of the key things to do, including if you want to work with us, where you can some of the packages that we offer, how to set up an appointment with us, how to do a discovery call, like entrepreneurship as a couple discovery call for 30 minutes to talk about where you are and what your next steps might be.
One of the things I struggle with during our relationships, times of trouble, was when the business stunk and when home life stunk. And it was a real struggle for me to get to a point where I can confidently say, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be, torture to have conversations, to be open, to be sharing, communicative, and unity, like you mentioned. It doesn't have to suck.
It doesn't. And the thing is, oftentimes, we hear a lot of things from movies and, other people. And the thing is, like you said, this is only based off of limited reality, right? Oftentimes, we don't have exposure to people that are in successful relationships, right? And if we do see them, we only see them once in a while, but we always remember them, right? We always see them. And it was always something interesting because, we've all been to Denny's where we've seen the old couple and they're not saying an entire word while they're sitting there. And for me, when I identified early on, what does a successful relationship look like, right? What are the characteristics I want to have, right? Those are the type of things you need to identify and put into writing and have these serious conversations, because unless you do that, everything will happen just by default. And we all know if you just leave it up to the wind, you may not get the result you want. So that's why working with a relationships coach, being able to get proper examples and getting the proper training is so critical. So I thank you guys so much for including this bonus. For you guys that are part of secretsofdigitalmarketers.com, you guys are getting a tremendous value right here. Honestly, I believe once you start taking care of your relationship, you're going to see skyrocketed results in every area of your business. Oftentimes, it's those areas besides marketing and sales that when you're at a plateau that you're not addressing, such as your finances or your relationships or your spiritual life, once you start taking care of those and spending as much attention as training and marketing and learning, that you start seeing big impact. So thank you guys for coming on the show. So excited to include this bonus in the membership. So secretsofdigitalmarketers.com. Once again, this is Allen Kotlyar. Thanks for coming on the show, Brenda. Thank you guys so much. Look forward to having your course and the additional bonuses in our back end here. Once again, Allen with secretsofdigitalmarketers.com. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Alan.